ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hey, Jules and Jez here. Join us as we unpack the news of the week on Not Stupid.
And yet it may also cement an enduring debasement of the way people speak to each other in politics. I think that's something definitely that would concern me in all of this. But in the meantime, I'll be sending you the memes as they come up.
You can find Not Stupid on the ABC Listen app.
And watch it on iView.
It's gained huge traction in the last few years because it can help bring on a good night's sleep. But is melatonin really safe, particularly for kids? Well, Australia's medicines regulator this week warned people to stop using imported melatonin products. Today, paediatric sleep researcher Sarah Blunden on why the advice is changing. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal Land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Sarah, we're going to take a look at the sleep hormone melatonin and discuss exactly what it is and how it works in a moment. But just tell me, first of all, how widespread is its use in Australia at the moment and how easy is it to get it?
Yes, very good question. Melatonin used to be only available for particular groups of children, those on the autism spectrum, those with ADHD, those with a syndrome called Smith-Magenis syndrome, and some children with visual impairment or Down syndrome. So specific cohorts, and it was only available from a doctor. Since the last 5 years, I'd say, there has been an exponential rise in the use of melatonin for children who are not in those cohorts. And this has been available initially online from countries where the regulation of melatonin is less rigid than in Australia. And also, even increasingly in the last year or so, GPs and paediatricians, primary healthcare professionals, are prescribing it for children who are not in those cohorts.
Okay, so there's a lot more parents who are turning to melatonin just to help with their children's sleep, I presume.
Yes, that's right. It's a bit of a snowball effect, I think. Parents would be discussing it, I guess, at the school drop-off or over coffee about how it is working for their children. So the parents have been thinking, this sounds like a really good idea for my children who are not sleeping very well.
I have found that melatonin has assisted us getting our toddler to sleep when it's been particularly challenging and we've sort of had a rough period of, sleepless nights and really, really difficult, experience with getting her to fall asleep.
I was pretty shocked. I thought I'd really hit the jackpot. We moved bedtimes down to being about an hour long, and the calmness they both experienced was quite mind-blowing.
Well, recently there has been a spike, Sarah, in the number of people ringing the poison hotline after their kids take melatonin. So just tell me what's been going on in relation to that.
Yeah, a worrying problem. The melatonin that has been available online from countries such as the United States have been, I think, the culprit here. So some of them particularly marketed to children, so in gummy form, looking at like lollies, sugary, cute, taste good, I suspect. The United States don't consider melatonin to be a pharmaceutical product. They consider it to be a dietary supplement, and so the regulations over there are not as stringent as they are in Australia. And parents that get it online, one, are buying a product that they actually don't know the content of very well because it's an online product. And two, they're bypassing Australia's TGA recommendations for the use of melatonin. And so parents get the impression that this is a safe product and a healthy product and a natural product.
So this Poisons hotline, it actually received almost 1,500 calls about children ingesting melatonin last year. I mean, if you overdose on this, what actually happens?
It's a really good question, because we don't know. Because we don't know the outcomes in typically developing children, and we only have specific data on children in those cohorts I mentioned to you, we have regulated the doses in those groups, and we have regulated over time, so we know what to expect. In typically developing children, we don't. There have been studies that have shown that the levels of melatonin in those online products have been anywhere from 0 to 400% of what they should be.
Wow.
So let's just say a parent is giving them this melatonin gummy, thinking it's safe, and the child thinks it tastes terrific. They may have taken 1, 2, 3. They may have used it as a lolly. They may have taken more than their fair share. So 1, we don't know how much they're taking. 2, we don't know what overdose looks like. And 3, we don't know what's in the gummy. So when they take more than they should, then we're going to be seeing levels of sleepiness, nausea, dizziness. That's what we've seen at the moment. We really don't know what the worst are. Some worst case scenarios are that children are very, very ill, showing very extreme versions of those things.
Well, the US online retailer iHerb, in response to this, actually suspended sales to Australia. And now, of course, Sarah, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, the drugs administrator here, of course, has issued a warning to consumers to stop consuming melatonin supplements that they've brought in from overseas. So just tell me what the TGA's advice is and how it's changed.
Thankfully, the TGA has risen that red flag of caution, which is terrific, because the sleep research community has been advocating for this for a little while. So they have understood, they've done their own research, and they've said that you can't have melatonin taken online. They've found that the evidence that I mentioned to you a little bit earlier, that some of these products have no melatonin and some of them have 400% more. And my understanding in the research that we've done at the International Paediatric Sleep Association Melatonin Task Force, of which I am a member, we found that the research shows that even in the same batch of gummies, in the same bottle, the melatonin might be different.
Wow.
So therefore, we can't take them with any assurance. And secondly, there is no data, absolutely none, on whether these are safe and efficacious in children who are typically developing.
All right, but tell me, if the melatonin is actually bought in Australia, is that okay? Is the TGA only referring to these overseas products?
They are. They do say in these guidelines that have just come out that even though the TGA does not have a recommendation on their site and in their documentation for typically developing children as yet, I suspect that they're doing their work behind the scenes to find out whether it is okay to give it to typically developing children. But as a researcher, I know that there isn't a lot of data there. So they have said in their guidelines, look, if a primary healthcare professional, GP or paediatrician, senses that the person, family in front of them are completely exhausted, it's a crisis situation of little sleep, and that can be very problematic, then it is at the primary healthcare professional's discretion to be able to give them a prescription for compound melatonin, which is made at compound pharmacies, so that they know exactly what's in it, it's made locally, it's regulated.
Okay, well, let's just step back for a moment then, Sarah, and get a bit more of an understanding about what melatonin does. It naturally forms in our bodies, doesn't it? So why are some people then also taking it in the gummy form or pill form or liquid form, if you like? What does it do?
Very good question. Melatonin is secreted in all mammals at night time at the end of our circadian day. Circadian clocks, of which all mammals have one, and certainly humans do, tells us when it is time to be alert and when it is time to be sleepy. Melatonin rises at night time because of the circadian day. It sends messages to all the parts of the body, all the major organs and all the major systems to slow down and go into sleep mode. Thanks to melatonin and thanks to the fact that there is little light, because that's one of the cues that melatonin gets to start its work. So melatonin is natural. There are only some cohorts, such as autism, as I mentioned before, ADHD and Smith-Magenis syndrome, where we know that melatonin can have a dysfunctional secretion level. It can be either delayed, it can either be flatter, there can be less of it, it can come at the wrong time of the day. Otherwise, everybody else has got melatonin in a normal secretion level, give or take a few, half an hour or so difference between one person and the next.
But if you're not sleeping well or you're not a good sleeper, Presumably you'll take a bit more, will you, just to help that process along? Because we all like a good night's sleep, that's for sure.
That's absolutely true, but we don't know whether they need any more melatonin. There's no evidence to suggest that those children are deficit in melatonin. There's evidence to say that they're not sleeping well, but it could just be because their bedtime routine is not healthy, that their circadian clock itself is out of whack. There's lots of different ways to investigate that, but it's very rare. In fact, we have no evidence at all, or any evidence to say that that's not the case, that their natural melatonin is not doing the right thing. So because the information out in the community is misinformed in that if we take melatonin, it's going to work. It does probably work, but all we're doing is adding on to what's existing. So it's like taking an extra bit of something when you really don't need it. But it does make a child more sleepy. Now, if there's a behavioural sleep issue, such as child running out of their bedroom, not wanting to sleep alone, or they simply are not tired at that time of the night, dosing them with melatonin will probably work. But is it the right option? Probably not.
Yeah, adults use it too though, right? Like, you hear people, if they've gone on a long flight, they have a bit of jet lag, they take a bit of melatonin.
Indeed, and that is effective because we also have data for that, and also they're adults. So we know that prescribing or giving hormones to people is in itself problematic because hormones all play together and they all interact with each other. And so in an adult, we have that data. We know what to expect. In children, we don't know. And these are growing bodies and growing brains. So we need to raise the red flag of caution even more.
Yeah, so we don't have any research then showing us what the long-term use of melatonin in a child might be doing. There's no data on that?
No, we don't. There is only data on children on the autism spectrum or ADHD, and the current published data goes for 2 years only. So I know that there are studies that are being undertaken at the moment where we're following up the same cohorts later, so we might have data coming out soon, but certainly not for years. I've had some children come into my clinic who've been on it for years.
All right, well, Sarah, for sleep-deprived parents, you can see why it would be appealing, of course. It can be a really tough time when you've got a young baby that won't go to sleep or a toddler, but should they keep doing it? What's your advice to them?
Yes, it's very tricky, and I totally understand that. As a psychologist and specialising in sleep, where families come into me wiped out with no sleep. 1, 2, 3 children that are not sleeping, the family is really, really in strife. So I absolutely understand. It's just that we need to use it under supervision of medical professionals. That's number 1. And 2, we need to search out for sustainable behaviours that are going to make that sleep better. And we know that they exist. They're very, very helpful. Cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia in adults and adolescents, and behavioural sleep interventions for younger people to help them to get better sleep. And we can do that. We can change that sleep so it's better, more functional, and the family can survive.
Well, given the lack of research and given now the TGA advice to stay away from the overseas products, what's your parting message for parents? What should they do right now?
Right now, I would avoid online products completely, and I would go to my general practitioner paediatrician and say, help me, and then seeking out a sleep psychologist or another health professional who's trained in these behavioural sleep interventions. It's a little bit like learning how to change behaviour at bedtime, and it's really about helping the parents, helping the families to cope with this sleep, and it's very, very effective.
Sarah Blunden is a paediatric sleep researcher, clinical psychologist and an adjunct professor at CQ University. This episode was produced by Jessica Wukyanov. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our acting supervising producer is Sydney Peed. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.